Hey everyone, thanks for coming back. This is an original story from Hidden Revenge Family, and it took a turn you truly didn't see coming. Let's get into it.
The first thing people notice about a military gala is the shine. Polished floors, polished metals, polished smiles that look just a little too perfect. The first thing people notice about me is the opposite. Dust. It was still stuck to my boots from the maintenance hangar when I stepped into the ballroom at Fort Liberty. No one told me the event would be this formal. Technically, it wasn't even my event. The invitation had Rachel's name on it, not mine. But the message she sent that afternoon was short. Come tonight, dress uniform is fine. So that's what I wore. My standard technical corps uniform. Clean pressed but simple. No fancy ribbons, no flight wings, and definitely no high heels. The room went quiet for half a second when I walked in. Not because I was important, because I clearly didn't belong. Crystal lights hung over the ballroom. Officers from 3 different branches stood around tall tables with polished glasses in their hands. Defense contractors, visiting generals, a few foreign observers, and right in the center of it all stood my sister, Captain Rachel Carter. She looked exactly like the Army recruitment posters loved to print. Tall, perfect posture, flight wings shining across her chest, dark blue mess dress uniform tailored like it came from a movie studio. Rachel had always known how to enter a room like she owned it, and tonight she absolutely did. A small circle of senior officers stood around her laughing at something she said. One of them was a colonel I recognized from base command. Another was a defense contractor who had been visiting the air wing all week. Rachel spotted me the moment I stepped through the door. Her smile didn't disappear. But it changed. You know that look someone gives when they just noticed something embarrassing they'd rather not explain. That was the look. She raised her glass slightly and called out across the room. Well, look who made it. A few heads turned. Now everyone was looking at me. I walked over anyway. Rachel looked me up and down slowly, her eyes stopping at my boots. Still dusty, she laughed. Wow, Brooke, you came straight from the shop floor. I shrugged. Maintenance shift ran late. One of the colonels raised an eyebrow. Rachel waved a hand casually. Oh, don't worry, she's not here for the gala. She just works on base. Then she turned back to the group and gestured toward me like I was a prop. This is my little sister. Pause. She counts screws. A few people chuckled politely. Rachel leaned closer to the table. Literally, aircraft maintenance logistics. She keeps track of the bolts and panels so the rest of us can actually fly. More laughter. I could feel several eyes scanning my uniform again, looking for rank or wings. They didn't find anything impressive. Rachel took a sip of wine and continued like it was the funniest thing in the world. Brooke always liked the safe seats. One of the contractors asked safe seats. Rachel nodded. You know, junior positions, ground jobs, support roles. Then she tilted her head toward me. She never had the nerve to fly. The colonel smiled politely. That's so, Rachel answered before I could say anything. Oh yeah, I went to flight school, combat training, the whole thing. Then she tapped her own chest lightly. Captain Carter, 3rd Tactical Air Wing. A small pause. Then she gestured at me again. And Brooke here prefers to stay on the ground counting bolts. Another wave of polite laughter passed around the table. I didn't argue. I didn't correct anything. I just stood there. Rachel watched my face carefully, probably expecting some reaction, but there wasn't one. After a moment, she leaned closer to the contractor beside her. Actually, this might work out perfectly. She turned toward me again. Brooke? Yeah, could you grab Mr. Donnelly another whiskey? She pointed to the bar across the room. No hesitation, no embarrassment in her voice. Just casual authority, like she was asking an assistant. The contractor laughed. You don't have to, Rachel cut him off. Oh, it's fine, she's basically staff anyway. Then she looked directly at me. Right, Brooke? The colonel shifted slightly. Even he looked a little uncomfortable now. Rachel didn't care. She lifted her glass again and said loudly enough for the nearby tables to hear, My sister is our unnamed assistant tonight. More laughter. Someone behind me whispered something I couldn't hear. Rachel smiled wider. So Brooke, go grab the whiskey. The room waited. People love moments like that. They want to see what the quiet person will do. Will they snap? Will they argue? Will they walk out? I looked at Rachel for a long second. Then I nodded once. Sure. And I walked toward the bar. Behind me, the conversation started again. Rachel's voice rose above the others. She's always been like that. Quiet, careful, junior mindset, a man asked. But she's military too, Rachel laughed. Technically, I didn't turn around. The bartender slid a glass toward me. Whiskey. Yeah. I carried the glass back across the ballroom. Rachel was still talking when I reached the table. Some people are built to lead missions, she was saying. Then she glanced at me and smiled again. And some people just help tighten the screws. I handed the glass to the contractor. Here you go, sir. He looked embarrassed. Thanks. Brooke, right, yeah? Rachel clinked her glass against his. See, efficient. Then she leaned closer to the group and lowered her voice slightly, though not enough to actually keep it private. That's why she's always stuck in junior seats. She looked at me again. No altitude required. The colonel laughed politely. The contractor forced a smile. Rachel looked completely satisfied. But something about my expression must have caught the colonel's attention. Because he stared at me a little longer than the others did. Not angry, not amused, just curious. Rachel noticed it too. She turned toward me again. What? I shook my head slightly. Nothing. Rachel leaned back in her chair, confident again. That's what I thought. I stood there quietly for another second. Then I set the empty tray back on the table and stepped away from the circle. No one stopped me. Across the ballroom I could see the tall windows reflecting the lights from the runway outside. Aircraft lights blinked slowly in the distance. Fort Liberty never really slept. And neither did the systems running underneath it. Rachel was still laughing when I reached the edge of the room, still telling stories about flight school, still explaining how some people were meant to fly higher than others. I looked down at my boots for a second. Dust from the maintenance hangar still clung to the leather. I didn't bother brushing it off. Because sometimes the people who think you're counting screws have absolutely no idea who controls the entire aircraft. But Rachel would learn that later. Right there in the ballroom, she still believed I was the quiet little sister with the junior job. And honestly, watching her believe that was almost funny. Before the story goes any further, I'm curious about something. Have you ever been the most capable person in the room, but everyone treated you like you were just the assistant because they never bothered to look closer? Tell me in the comments. I stepped out of the ballroom and into the cool night air. The noise from the gala faded behind me as the doors closed. Out on the Fort Liberty walkway, the sound of aircraft engines in the distance replaced the music and laughter. I leaned against the railing for a moment and looked toward the runway lights. Rachel's voice was still echoing in my head. Junior seats, counting screws. What made it funny was that 12 years ago, those seats had never been meant for me. They had been meant for her. Back then, we were both sitting in a small kitchen with a stack of envelopes spread across the table. Our father was asleep in the living room. The TV was still on low volume, some old war documentary he liked to watch. Rachel had just opened the letter. She read it once, then she read it again. And then she looked up at me with the kind of excitement that makes people forget how to breathe. I got it. I already knew what it was. The Air Combat Scholarship, full training pipeline, flight school, officer track. The kind of program that only accepted a handful of people every year. Rachel slid the letter across the table. Brooke, this is it. I read the first line and smiled. Congratulations. She stared at me. That's it. Congratulations. What else do you want me to say? Rachel leaned back in her chair. I thought you'd be more dramatic. I'm happy for you. She studied my face. You applied too. Yeah, and I didn't get it. Rachel blinked. You're serious? Yeah. That part wasn't exactly true, but I didn't say anything else. Rachel pushed her chair back and stood up. This is huge. She paced around the kitchen like she had already stepped into a cockpit. Combat flight training, Brooke. Fighters. I nodded. Yeah. Then her voice lowered slightly. There's just one problem. I already knew what she meant. Our father, 6 months earlier, he had collapsed at work. The diagnosis came 2 weeks later. Advanced lung damage from years of exposure during overseas service. He wasn't dying immediately, but he wasn't going to be able to take care of himself either. Rachel leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. Flight school is in Nevada. I know, that's almost 2,000 miles away. Yeah. She glanced toward the living room where Dad was sleeping. Then she looked back at me. Someone has to stay. The room went quiet. Rachel didn't say it out loud, but the question was obvious. Who was going to stay with Dad? And who was going to fly? Rachel stared at the acceptance letter again. I worked for this. I know. She looked at me again. I can't give this up. I know. She waited, probably expecting an argument. Instead, I reached across the table and pushed the letter back toward her. Then don't, Rachel frowned. What, you should go? Brooke, you earned it. Rachel studied my face carefully. You're serious? Yeah, she looked relieved. Really relieved. Then she asked the question that mattered. What about you? I shrugged. I'll figure something out. 2 months later, Rachel left for flight training. I stayed. I enlisted through a technical support track that kept me assigned close to Fort Liberty. Logistics, systems maintenance, data analysis, not glamorous, but it meant I could still drive home every night. For the first year, Rachel called almost every week. She told stories about simulators, instructors, high-G turns, and night flights. She sounded happy, proud, like someone who had finally found the sky she had been chasing her whole life. Meanwhile, I spent most of my nights at the kitchen table going through our family accounts. Medical bills, insurance paperwork, mortgage payments. Our father had a small veterans assistance fund set up through a local support program. It wasn't huge, but it helped. The problem was that medical care adds up fast, so I started adding to it. Extra shifts, technical consulting on base systems, data analysis contracts that the command office needed done quietly and quickly. Every dollar went into that account. Rachel knew about it. At least in theory, she called it the family safety net. During her second year of flight training, she started asking for small favors. Hey Brooke, can you spot me 5,000? Just until next month. Sometimes it was 10, sometimes 15, always temporary, always urgent. Flight gear upgrades, training expenses, moving costs. Rachel always sounded confident. I'll pay it back once I'm assigned to a squadron. I believed her, at first. Years passed. Rachel graduated, got her wings, then her officer commission, Captain Carter. By the time she returned to Fort Liberty with her flight unit, she looked exactly like the officer everyone expected her to be. Sharp uniform, perfect confidence, the kind of pilot people like to photograph. But the money never came back. Instead, the requests kept getting bigger. Brooke, I just need a short bridge loan. Brooke, this opportunity came up. Brooke, trust me on this one. Every time she said the same thing. I'll double it and send it back. I didn't push too hard, because by then our father's condition had stabilized, and Rachel's career looked impressive. Until the afternoon, I opened the account ledger and saw a number that didn't make sense. $150,000. Missing. At first, I thought it was a banking error, so I checked the transaction history. 3 transfers, all authorized under Rachel's access code. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I called her. Rachel answered on the 3rd ring. Hey Brooke, what's up? Did you move money from Dad's support account? A short pause, then her voice changed slightly. Why? How much did you move? Another pause. Brooke, relax. How much? She sighed. About $150,000. It's an investment. I felt my jaw tighten. Rachel, that fund is for Dad's care. I know. Then why did you take it? Her voice dropped to the calm tone she always used when she thought she was the smartest person in the room. Because it's temporary. Temporary, I put it into a private aviation startup. What startup? Don't worry about the details. I stood there in the kitchen staring at the empty ledger balance. That money isn't yours. Rachel laughed softly. Brooke, relax. That account was for medical care, and the investment will triple it. When soon? How soon? Another pause. Then she said something that made the whole situation clear. Look, appearances matter in this business. What does that mean? It means I need to maintain a certain level of credibility with investors. You stole money from a veterans support fund. I didn't steal it. You took it without telling anyone. It's leverage. I stared at the phone. Rachel? She cut me off. You worry too much. Then she added one last sentence before hanging up. Trust me. The call ended. I stood in that quiet kitchen for a long time, staring at the empty account balance. 12 years earlier, I had given Rachel the sky, and somehow she had decided that still wasn't enough. The next morning, I was back in the maintenance building before sunrise. The hangar lights were already on. A few mechanics were finishing the night shift, their tools laid out on metal carts beside the aircraft. Fort Liberty wakes up early. Aircraft don't care about sleep schedules. I dropped my bag at my desk and pulled up the system console that monitored flight data across the base. Most people thought my job was inventory, bolts, panels, maintenance logs. Rachel loved that version of the story. What she never mentioned was the second part of the job. Flight data analysis. Every aircraft on base recorded thousands of system signals every second during flight. Engine pressure control, response, hydraulic balance, navigation alignment. All of it fed into the system we monitored. My job was to watch for patterns that could kill someone if no one noticed. I logged into the network and checked the upcoming schedule. A red flag appeared immediately. Friday's demonstration exercise. International observers, defense contractors, senior command. Rachel Carter listed as lead pilot. The briefing summary sat at the top of the screen. Demonstration formation, white swan pattern. I stared at the name for a second. Rachel loved naming things. It sounded dramatic. The plan looked impressive on paper. 4 aircraft, tight formation, high-speed pass, vertical brake maneuver. The kind of performance that makes people clap at air shows. But demonstration flights aren't air shows. They still follow the same safety rules as combat training. I opened the aircraft assignments. 3 of the jets had passed full inspection. The 4th one stopped me. Aircraft 4027, maintenance warning from last week. Hydraulic fluctuation during high-speed roll tests. Not catastrophic, but not cleared for aggressive maneuvering either. The maintenance recommendation was simple: limit roll stress until recalibration was completed. I scrolled down to the final flight approval report. Signed by Captain Rachel Carter. Status cleared for full demonstration operations. I leaned back in my chair. That didn't make sense. So I pulled the raw data. The numbers confirmed it. The hydraulic response lagged slightly during high-speed rotation, not enough to fail a standard mission. But in a tight formation maneuver, one delay at the wrong second could push the aircraft out of alignment. And when jets fly close together, alignment matters. A lot. I checked the budget logs next. Another strange pattern appeared. Maintenance funds for Rachel's squadron had been redirected 3 times that quarter, not to equipment, to public relations operations. I didn't have to guess what that meant. Rachel had started building a reputation on social media. Photos with aircraft, short videos from inside cockpits, interviews about leadership. The base communications office loved it. Rachel called it modern military transparency. The accounting department called it public engagement. But when I looked at the numbers, it meant something simpler. Less money for mechanical updates, more money for public appearances. I stared at the hydraulic data again. Then I picked up the phone. Rachel answered quickly. "Captain Carter, it's Brooke." A short pause. "Oh, are you cleared to talk?" "Make it quick. I'm reviewing the demonstration flight plan." Rachel sighed immediately. "Why aircraft 4027 still has a hydraulic delay during high-speed roll? That's minor. The maintenance recommendation says limit aggressive maneuvers." Rachel sounded annoyed now. "It's been reviewed." "By who?" "By me. That's not how safety review works." Rachel laughed quietly. "Brooke, what your logistics? I'm also the person monitoring system performance. And I'm the pilot flying the aircraft." I pulled the numbers back onto the screen. The hydraulic response delay is small, but the white swan maneuver puts 4 aircraft within tight formation during vertical rotation. Rachel's tone changed slightly. "You've been watching too many flight videos. I'm reading the data." "The data is fine, it's not fine." Rachel let out a long breath like she was talking to someone slow. "Listen carefully." I stayed quiet. "The demonstration is in 2 days. I know. International observers will be there. I know. So the plan is not changing. The aircraft needs recalibration." "No, it doesn't. The hydraulic lag could push the formation off-center during the break." Rachel laughed again. "You think you understand formation flying because you stare at spreadsheets?" I felt my jaw tighten. "I understand physics." Rachel's voice sharpened. "And I understand rank." Silence hung on the line for a second. Then she continued. "You're not part of this operation. I'm part of the safety network. You're part of the ground crew. That's not accurate." "It's accurate enough." I looked again at the financial transfers connected to her squadron. One entry stood out. $30,000, catering and event hosting, 3 days before the demonstration. "You moved maintenance funds again." Rachel didn't answer for a second. Then she said calmly, "That's none of your business. It becomes my business when the aircraft performance is affected. The aircraft is fine." "It isn't." Rachel's patience was gone now. "Let me explain something to you." I stayed quiet. "Pilots manage risk. You're creating unnecessary risk." "No, I'm managing optics." Optics don't keep jets in formation. Rachel laughed again. Actually, they do. What does that mean? It means investors and observers need to see confidence. This is a military exercise. It's also a funding demonstration. I stared at the screen. You redirected maintenance funds so you could throw parties. They're networking events. You signed off on a maneuver the aircraft shouldn't perform. Rachel's voice turned cold. You're overstepping. I'm doing my job. No. You're interfering with mine. The data says the maneuver isn't safe. Rachel didn't hesitate this time. If you keep pushing this, I'll file a report. A report for interference with an active command operation. I almost laughed. You're threatening disciplinary action because I flagged a safety risk. I'm reminding you where you sit in the chain of command. I leaned back in my chair again. The hangar was getting louder as the morning crew arrived. Rachel continued speaking. You work junior support roles. I work system oversight. You count screws. I monitor aircraft systems. Rachel's voice sharpened again. You monitor them quietly, and when the numbers show a problem, you leave it to the people who actually fly. Silence filled the line for a few seconds. Then Rachel added one last sentence. If you interfere with this flight plan again, I'll have you written up. For what? For forgetting your place. She hung up before I could answer. I slowly lowered the phone. Across the hangar floor, one of the technicians started an engine diagnostic test. The low mechanical hum filled the building. I looked back at the hydraulic data again. The delay was still there, small but real. Rachel called her maneuver the White Swan, graceful, elegant, perfect for cameras. But numbers don't care about elegance, they care about math. And the math said something Rachel didn't want to hear. If that aircraft rolled a fraction of a second late during a tight formation break, someone in that sky could die. I closed the flight data window and was about to stand up when my phone started vibrating on the desk. The caller ID showed our home number. That almost never happened during the day. I picked up. Brooke, it was my mother, Jolene Carter. Her voice sounded tense. You need to come home tonight. What happened? It's about the house. My stomach tightened slightly. What about it? The bank called this morning. A pause. They're starting foreclosure proceedings. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. That's not possible. Just come home. Mom, the mortgage payments are current. Rachel is already here. We need to talk together. The call ended before I could ask anything else. 2 hours later, I parked outside the house I had been paying for since I was 19. The same small brick house my father bought after leaving the army. The same house where Rachel and I grew up. The living room lights were on when I walked in. Rachel was already sitting at the table, still in her officer uniform. Her posture looked calm, too calm. Our mother stood near the kitchen counter holding a stack of papers. Rachel smiled slightly when she saw me. Well, the junior analyst finally arrived. I ignored that. Why is the bank talking about foreclosure? Mom placed the papers on the table. You should read this. I picked them up. Mortgage contract amendment, loan extension agreement, collateral documentation. My eyes stopped on the final page. Property lien authorization, signed by Rachel Carter. My voice stayed quiet. You used the house as collateral. Rachel leaned back in her chair. Yes. For what loan and investment? How much? 300,000. My mother stepped closer. Rachel said it was necessary. I looked at her. Necessary for what? Rachel answered. For an aviation development opportunity. That fake startup you mentioned. Rachel's smile disappeared. Watch your tone. You borrowed against Dad's house. Temporary leverage. That's the second time you've used that phrase. Rachel crossed her arms. Relax. The investment was supposed to close weeks ago, but it didn't. Market timing shifted. So now the bank wants their collateral. Mom stepped in quickly. That's why we're talking tonight. I looked at her. What exactly are we talking about? She pushed another paper toward me. This would solve everything. I read the title. Inheritance Transfer Authorization. My name printed at the top. Rachel's name under beneficiary. I looked up slowly. You want me to give up my inheritance? Rachel shrugged. It simplifies the loan restructuring. How? The bank will accept a new financial guarantor. And that guarantor would be you. Rachel nodded. Exactly. That makes no sense. It makes perfect sense. I leaned forward slightly. The house is already collateral, yes. So how does my inheritance fix your debt? Rachel smiled again. Because the bank wants stronger long-term backing. And you told them I would sign. I told them the family would cooperate. Mom looked at me carefully. Brooke? Rachel's reputation is at stake. I stared at her. Her reputation. She's an officer. That didn't stop her from mortgaging the house. Mom ignored that. If this scandal becomes public, it could damage her career, Rachel added quietly. And that affects the whole family. I let out a slow breath. So the plan is for me to give up my inheritance so Rachel can keep borrowing money. Rachel shook her head. That's a dramatic way to say it. What's the accurate way family support? I tapped the document. This transfers the house entirely to you. Rachel shrugged again. You don't need it. I stared at her. I've been paying the mortgage for 6 years. Rachel waved a hand dismissively. With your little logistics salary, yes, that barely covers groceries. Mom stepped closer again. Brooke, Rachel has real opportunities in front of her. I looked at her. And I don't. Mom hesitated. Rachel answered instead. You chose a smaller life. The room went quiet. Rachel leaned forward. You stayed on the ground. That was for Dad. That was your choice. I gave up flight school. Rachel rolled her eyes. Oh, please. You know that's true. You never had the courage for it anyway. I almost laughed at that. Mom placed a pen on the table. Just sign the paper. I looked at her slowly. You want me to give Rachel full ownership of Dad's house. It protects her financial standing. She already took money from Dad's Veterans Fund. Mom froze slightly. Rachel's eyes narrowed. That was temporary. You took $150,000. Rachel's voice sharpened. You went digging through accounts. I managed those accounts. Mom looked confused. Rachel, is that true? Rachel waved it off. It's being handled. I turned the document back toward them. I'm not signing this. Rachel leaned back. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand perfectly. Mom's voice hardened. Brooke, yes, don't be selfish. I blinked. Selfish? Rachel nodded calmly. This is exactly the problem. What problem? You've always been small-minded. I felt my patience fading. You're asking me to give away the only asset keeping Dad secure. Rachel pointed at my uniform. That attitude is why you're stuck in junior roles. This has nothing to do with rank. It has everything to do with ambition. Mom pushed the pen closer to me. Sign the paper. No, Rachel leaned forward. You're embarrassing the family. I'm protecting it. You're blocking progress. You're drowning us in debt. Rachel slammed her hand lightly on the table. This investment will change everything. It already did. How? You used the house. Rachel glared at me. Mom suddenly stepped closer. Enough. Before I could react, her hand struck my face. The sound echoed across the room. For a second, the world went quiet. A sharp taste of blood filled my mouth. Mom's voice shook with anger. You selfish girl. Rachel didn't move. She just watched. I slowly touched my lip. Blood on my fingers. Mom was breathing heavily now. All Rachel is asking for is support. I wiped the blood away with the back of my hand. Then I stood up. Rachel tilted her head. Running away, oh. I picked up a thick folder from the edge of the table. Documents I had brought with me. Bank records, transfer logs, financial statements. Rachel noticed the folder. What's that? Paperwork? For what? For later. Mom folded her arms. So you're refusing to help your own family. I looked at her calmly. I already have. Rachel laughed quietly. Not enough. I walked toward the door. Rachel called after me. You're making a mistake, Brooke. I paused for a second but didn't turn around. Maybe. Then I opened the door and stepped outside. Behind me, the house was silent. Inside that folder were 12 years of records. Every transfer, every loan, every signature Rachel thought no one would notice. And for the first time since this started, I was finally ready to use them. I slid the folder onto the passenger seat of my truck and started the engine. For a few seconds, I just sat there in the dark outside the house. The porch light was still on behind me. Inside, Rachel and my mother were probably still arguing about money and reputation. Out on the road, the base was quiet. I drove back toward Fort Liberty without turning on the radio. My phone buzzed halfway through the drive. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something told me not to. Brooke Carter, a calm male voice answered. Specialist Carter, this is Admiral Alexander Sterling. I pulled the truck onto the shoulder immediately. The name didn't belong in my phone. Yes, sir. I assume you're off duty. Yes, sir. Good. I need you at headquarters in 30 minutes. My eyes moved to the dashboard clock. Is this about the demonstration flight num? The answer was immediate. This concerns a classified systems review. I straightened in my seat. Understood. the Admiral continued. You will enter through the East Security Gate. Clearance code has already been assigned to your ID. Yes, sir. And Specialist Carter, yes, sir. Do not discuss this meeting with anyone. The line went silent. When I arrived at the command building, the East Gate guard barely looked at me. He scanned my ID and nodded. Go ahead, ma'am. Inside the building, a young lieutenant escorted me through 2 separate security doors. No small talk, no explanation. Just a long hallway and the quiet sound of military boots on polished floors. The lieutenant finally stopped outside a conference room. He knocked once. Sir Specialist Carter is here. A voice inside answered. Send her in. The lieutenant stepped aside. I walked in. Admiral Alexander Sterling stood near the large digital display on the wall. Silver hair, calm posture. The kind of officer who looked like he had seen enough real operations that he no longer cared about decorations. 2 other officers sat at the table with laptops open. Sterling gestured toward a chair. Specialist Carter. Yes, sir. Sit down. I did. He studied me for a moment. You're aware that most people on this base think you manage supply inventories? Yes, sir. And you've allowed that assumption to continue? Yes, sir. Sterling nodded once. Good. He tapped the display. The screen changed to a large system diagram. Hundreds of data lines connected across the base network. Aircraft systems, flight control, security infrastructure, communications. Sterling spoke calmly. 3 years ago, the Department of Defense began integrating all flight operations at Fort Liberty through a unified system. I knew the system. I built half of it. Sterling continued. It's called Skynet. One of the officers added Skynet manages real-time aircraft telemetry, maintenance diagnostics, flight clearance, authorization, and operational security monitoring. Sterling looked at me again. And according to our records, you're the only person on this base who fully understands how it works. I stayed quiet. Sterling leaned slightly against the table. Officially, you're listed as a systems logistics specialist. Yes, sir. Unofficially, I answered simply. I designed the data integration architecture. One of the officers whistled quietly. Sterling didn't look surprised. That's what we thought. He changed the screen again. New data appeared. Financial transactions, network access logs, personnel credentials. Sterling pointed at the system map. Skynet has a secondary capability most personnel don't know about. Yes, sir, integrated biometric access tracking. Every secure terminal on base required fingerprint confirmation. Skynet recorded every login, every file access, every modification. Sterling folded his arms. That brings us to our problem. He tapped the screen again. A name appeared. Captain Rachel Carter. I kept my face neutral. Sterling noticed. You know her. Yes, sir. Your sister. Yes, sir. Sterling walked slowly around the table. Captain Carter requested restricted access to internal financial auditing records this afternoon. That system isn't part of her operational clearance. Correct. One of the officers opened a laptop, but she attempted to access it anyway. The screen displayed a timeline. Rachel's ID, 3 separate login attempts, all blocked. Sterling looked at me. Do you know why she would want those records? I didn't answer immediately. Then I said carefully. She's been moving money between several accounts. Sterling nodded. We know. Another officer spoke up. The interesting part is that Captain Carter tried to bypass standard clearance protocols. Sterling tapped the screen again. That's when Skynet triggered a silent monitoring sequence. Every command Rachel had entered was now recorded. Timestamps, access attempts, system responses. Sterling turned toward me again. You installed that monitoring feature last month. Yes, sir. Without telling most of the command staff. Yes, sir. Sterling almost smiled. Smart. He pointed at the log entries. Captain Carter believes she was simply denied access. Yes, sir. But in reality, every keystroke she entered was recorded. Yes, sir. Sterling walked back to the display, which means we now have a full record of her attempt to enter restricted systems. I looked at the timeline again. Rachel's login attempts happened just after our argument that morning. She had been trying to find financial records, probably hoping to erase something. Sterling studied the data. Captain Carter is scheduled to lead the demonstration flight tomorrow. Yes, sir. And the international observers arrive in 12 hours. Yes, sir. Sterling turned off the display. The room went quiet. Then he looked directly at me. Specialist Carter, your sister believes you're just the person who counts bolts in a warehouse. Yes, sir. And she believes her rank gives her authority over anyone below her. Yes, sir. Sterling nodded slowly. That assumption is about to become very useful. He walked toward the door. Continue monitoring Skynet. Yes, sir. If Captain Carter attempts another unauthorized access request, I want the full record. Yes, sir. Sterling paused before leaving. One more thing. Yes, sir. He looked at me carefully. Your call sign. I blinked once. Yes, sir. Sterling's voice stayed calm. It's still active in the system. Yes, sir. He nodded. Good. Then he opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. The other officers followed him. I stayed in the empty conference room for a moment. On the dark screen in front of me, the Skynet system was still running. Every aircraft, every system, every security door on base, all connected. Most people thought I worked in the background. Just another technician in a dusty uniform. The person Rachel liked to call a screw counter. But the truth was simpler than that. Every aircraft on this base could fly because the system allowed it. And right now, I was the one holding the system controls. I logged back into Skynet the moment I returned to my workstation. The hangar was already busy. Morning crews were running pre-flight diagnostics while technicians moved tool carts across the concrete floor. Engines started and stopped in controlled bursts outside. Friday demonstration day. Rachel's big stage. My system dashboard filled the screen. Aircraft status indicators blinked in neat rows. Flight clearance channels were active. Everything looked normal, except the financial folder still sitting on my desk. I opened it again. 12 years of transactions. Every transfer Rachel had taken. Every loan she promised to repay. Every time I quietly covered a bill to keep the family stable. Mortgage payments, insurance, medical equipment for Dad. Even the premium credit card Rachel liked to use when she entertained investors. The one she called her prestige card. Technically, it was issued under her name. Technically, it ran through my account. I stared at the account statement for a moment. Then I picked up my phone. The bank representative answered after 2 rings. Financial services. How may I help you? My name is Brooke Carter. I need to report a card compromised. Which account, ma'am? I read the card number slowly. The agent typed quickly. Yes, I see the account. Are you reporting unauthorized use? Yes. Do you want the card frozen immediately? Yes. A pause. Would you like to initiate a fraud review on recent transactions? Yes. The agent hesitated slightly. This will suspend all charges and block future payments until the investigation is complete. That's fine. Understood. She typed again. The card is now frozen. Thank you. I ended the call and leaned back in my chair. 1 down. Next, I opened the household financial system. Mortgage autopay, utilities, insurance, medical supply account, every payment that had quietly run through my salary for years. I disabled each one. Click, click, click. For the first time in over a decade, the Carter family accounts were no longer tied to me. Across the hangar, someone shouted for a wrench. Engines roared briefly outside. The base was moving toward demonstration time, which meant Rachel was probably already at the squadron office preparing her briefing. My phone rang 15 minutes later. Rachel! I let it ring twice before answering. What? Her voice exploded through the speaker. What did you do? I kept my tone calm. I'm going to need more details. My credit card just got frozen. Oh, the bank says there's a fraud investigation. That's standard procedure. Brooke. Yes, you're the only person who could do that. I'm the account holder. That card is mine. It's attached to my financial profile. Rachel's voice turned sharp. You had no right. I had every right. That card is used for operational networking. It's used for restaurants and investor dinners. You're interfering with my work. No, I'm correcting my finances. Rachel's breathing was loud now. You don't understand the timing. Oh, I do. The demonstration flight is in 3 hours. I know. I have people arriving from 3 countries. That sounds stressful. Rachel almost growled. Fix it. No, silence. Then she said quietly, You're making a very serious mistake. Maybe you think you can sabotage me the day of a major operation? I froze a personal credit card. That card funds critical networking. That card funds luxury dinners. Rachel hung up without another word. I checked the Skynet dashboard again. Flight crews were beginning final checks. Aircraft 4027 still showed the same hydraulic warning I had flagged earlier. It hadn't been recalibrated. Rachel had ignored the recommendation, exactly as expected. 20 minutes later, the door to the control room slammed open. Rachel stormed inside like she owned the building. 2 junior technicians jumped slightly when they saw her. She didn't notice them. Her eyes locked on me. There you are. I stayed seated at the console. Good morning, Captain. Rachel walked straight across the room. Her uniform was perfectly pressed. Her face wasn't. Fix the card. No, her voice rose. You don't get to do this. I already did. You're a logistics tech. Yes, you don't touch officer financial privileges. That card isn't military. Rachel leaned closer. You're acting like trash. One of the technicians behind me stopped typing. Rachel didn't care. You've always been garbage, Brooke. I kept my eyes on the screen. Strong words. You're jealous. No, you couldn't fly, so now you're trying to drag me down. That's not necessary. Rachel slammed her hand on the console. Unfreeze the card. No. Her voice turned cold. You think your little maintenance job protects you? I turned slowly in my chair. No, then why are you doing this? Because I'm done paying for your lifestyle. Rachel stepped even closer. For a second it looked like she might actually hit me. You forget who outranks you. I didn't answer. Instead I looked past her. Every technician in the control room had stopped working. Rachel noticed it too. She turned around. 5 men and 2 women stood near the equipment stations. Rachel expected something very simple in that moment. She expected them to acknowledge her rank. That's how the chain of command normally works. An officer enters the room, everyone responds. But that's not what happened. One of the senior technicians straightened first, then another, then the entire group moved at the same time. 7 technicians stood at attention, and they saluted, not Rachel, me. Rachel's expression froze. I returned the salute calmly, at ease. The technicians lowered their hands and went back to their stations. Rachel stared at me like the room had just shifted sideways. What was that? I turned back toward the console. Standard protocol. For who? For the system supervisor. Rachel's voice dropped. You're not their supervisor. I typed one command on the keyboard. Skynet authorization panel opened. My clearance code appeared at the top. Rachel saw it. Her eyes narrowed. What exactly do you do here, Brooke? I didn't answer. Outside the control room window, the runway lights blinked steadily. Aircraft engines started one by one. Rachel's demonstration flight was getting closer. She leaned toward me again. This isn't over. I know. You'll regret interfering with me. Maybe. Rachel stared at the system screen one more time. Then she turned and walked out of the control room without another word. Behind me, the technicians continued working quietly. On the monitor, Skynet tracked every aircraft preparing for launch. And somewhere in the system, logs every move Rachel made was still being recorded. Rachel slammed the control room door on her way out. The room stayed quiet for a few seconds after she left. No one said anything. The technicians just kept working, eyes on their screens, hands moving over keyboards and system panels. Outside the glass wall, the runway lights stretched into the distance. 3 aircraft were already on the taxi line. Rachel's jet was 4th in the sequence. Aircraft 4027. I pulled the flight telemetry feed onto my main monitor. Engine temperature stable. Fuel levels normal. Hydraulic response, still delayed. The same fraction of a second I had flagged yesterday, still there. The hangar speakers crackled to life. Demonstration flight crews report to aircraft. Voices answered one by one over the internal channel. Pilots confirming, ground crews clearing the runway. I switched Skynet to live command view. From here I could see everything. Flight clearance codes, aircraft status, pilot authorization keys, all connected through the system. The door behind me opened again. Admiral Sterling walked in with 2 officers and a group of civilian observers. Defense contractors, international representatives, the kind of people who write checks big enough to change entire programs. Sterling glanced around the room once and then stopped beside my station. Status, flight crews boarding now, sir. The first aircraft started rolling toward the runway. A deep engine roar vibrated through the building. The demonstration broadcast activated on the large wall screen. 4 cockpit cameras appeared. Rachel's face filled the 4th frame. Helmet on, visor lifted. She looked confident. Very confident. Rachel loved an audience. Her voice came through the radio channel. Captain Carter, ready for launch. The control tower answered. White Swan formation cleared for demonstration sequence. The first aircraft accelerated down the runway, then the second, then the third. Rachel's jet moved forward last. Sterling watched the screen silently. The civilian observers leaned closer to the display. One of them whispered, "That's Carter leading the formation, right?" Another nodded. Rising Star pilot. Rachel's aircraft reached the runway line. Her voice came through again. White Swan lead ready. Tower control responded. Cleared for takeoff. The jet surged forward. In seconds, it lifted into the sky and joined the other 3 aircraft. 4 jets climbed in tight formation above the base. The observers applauded quietly. Rachel's voice came through the radio channel again. White Swan formation established. On the monitor, the 4 aircraft moved together like a single machine. Perfect spacing, perfect alignment. Exactly the kind of visual performance Rachel wanted. One of the investors spoke quietly. Impressive coordination. Sterling didn't respond. He was watching the data feed on my screen. Altitude increasing, speed rising, hydraulic response still lagging slightly. Rachel's voice came through again. Preparing for vertical brake maneuver. That was the moment. The White Swan's signature move. 4 jets would climb together, then separate sharply in different directions. Fast, precise, and dangerous if anything went wrong. I watched the telemetry carefully. Hydraulic delay 0.42 seconds. Not large, but enough. The aircraft climbed higher. Rachel's voice sounded excited now. White Swan initiating brake on my mark. I moved my hand slowly to the Skynet control panel. Sterling noticed. Hold, yes sir. The jets reached the top of the climb. Rachel began the maneuver. 3, 2, 1. At that exact moment, the hydraulic lag triggered. Aircraft 4027 rolled late, not dramatically, but just enough to push it slightly off formation. The distance between Rachel's jet and the aircraft beside her shrank fast. Too fast. I didn't wait. My fingers entered the override command. Skynet pilot authorization system opened instantly. Aircraft 4027 control lock engaged. Rachel's voice exploded through the radio. Her jet stopped responding. The control surfaces froze under automated safety hold. Control tower, I've lost response. Her voice was sharp now. Authorization failure. Request immediate override. The other pilots broke formation and climbed away. The observers in the room stopped talking. Sterling stepped closer to the screen. Rachel's voice came again louder. Control tower respond. I need clearance code. Tower control looked towards Sterling. Sterling didn't answer them. Instead, he walked to the central microphone connected to the command channel. Rachel was still speaking over the radio. System malfunction. Request emergency override. Sterling pressed the transmit button, but he didn't speak to Rachel. He leaned slightly toward the microphone. His voice was quiet, almost calm. Valkyrie, stop the flight. The command traveled through Skynet instantly. My system confirmed it. Command authority recognized. Valkyrie override confirmed. Rachel's cockpit camera filled the wall screen. Her face changed immediately. Confusion first, then realization. Her eyes moved quickly across the cockpit interface. The authorization label had appeared on her control panel. Command override Valkyrie. Rachel's voice returned to the radio, but this time it sounded different. Tighter, control tower, confirm override source. No one in the tower answered. Sterling stood beside my console. The observers were whispering now. One of them asked quietly, "What's Valkyrie?" Sterling didn't look at them. He was watching Rachel's aircraft descend slowly under automated control. Safe. Stable. Rachel's cockpit camera still showed her face, pale now, because she understood something very simple. Only one person on this base had Valkyrie authorization. The system screen beside me displayed the command confirmation. Operator ID, my ID. Rachel stared directly at the camera for a long moment. And for the first time in her life, Captain Rachel Carter finally realized that the junior sister she liked to laugh about was the one who had just grounded her aircraft. Rachel's aircraft touched down 10 minutes later. Skynet kept the jet in controlled descent the entire time. Smooth, stable, automatic. The kind of landing that made it clear the pilot wasn't the one flying anymore. On the large screen, we watched the aircraft roll across the runway and slow to a stop. No one in the control room spoke. The investors looked confused. The officers looked serious. Admiral Sterling finally stepped away from the microphone. Escort Captain Carter to Command Briefing Room 3. 2 military police officers nodded and left the room immediately. Sterling turned to me. Specialist Carter, yes sir, report to the command building in 20 minutes. Yes sir, he looked at me carefully. Full uniform, I nodded. Yes sir. 20 minutes later, I walked through the command building entrance again. But this time, I wasn't wearing the dusty technical uniform Rachel liked to joke about. The uniform I wore now was sealed in a locker that very few people on base had ever seen. Strategic Systems Division dress uniform, dark navy, formal insignia, 3 classified program ribbons, 2 operational commendation medals, a silver command clearance badge. I rarely wore it, mostly because it raised too many questions. Tonight those questions were about to get answered. The hallway outside Briefing Room 3 was crowded when I arrived. 2 officers stood guard outside the door. Inside, voices were already raised. Rachel's voice was the loudest. "This is ridiculous." I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room went quiet almost immediately. Rachel stood at the center of the table, still in her flight suit. Her helmet rested on the table beside her. 2 military police officers stood nearby. At the far end of the room sat Admiral Sterling and several senior officers. But they weren't the only people there. My father sat quietly in a chair near the wall. My mother sat beside him. Rachel must have called them the moment the flight ended. Rachel turned when she heard the door, and for the first time that day she stopped talking. Her eyes moved slowly from my boots upward, the polished dress shoes, the formal uniform, the medals, then the clearance badge. Her mouth opened slightly. "What is that?" No one answered. I walked to the table and placed a thin tablet computer in front of Admiral Sterling. He nodded once. "Proceed." Rachel laughed nervously. "Proceed with what I turned on the screen." A video appeared on the large wall display. Rachel's face appeared immediately. Security footage, her standing in a bank office, signing a document. Rachel frowned. "What is this?" The video zoomed in. Her hand, the signature line, my father's name printed above it. Rachel's voice filled the room again. "That's not," Sterling interrupted. "That video was recorded 8 months ago." I tapped the tablet again. The screen changed. Bank transfer records appeared. Account numbers, transaction dates, amounts. The total highlighted in red. $150,000. Rachel's breathing slowed. Sterling spoke calmly. "These funds were taken from a veteran support account belonging to Sergeant Daniel Carter." My father stared at the screen. Rachel shook her head. "That money was an investment." Sterling didn't respond. I tapped the tablet again. The display changed. Engineering diagrams filled the screen. Aircraft control schematics, maintenance reports. Highlighted sections showed removed safety checks. Rachel stared at them. Recognition slowly appeared on her face. Sterling continued speaking. "These design revisions were approved under Captain Carter's authorization code." Rachel shook her head harder. "That was a temporary modification." One of the engineering officers spoke up. "Temporary modifications don't remove hydraulic redundancy limits." Rachel turned toward him. "You don't understand operational pressure." He didn't answer. I tapped the screen again. Skynet system logs appeared. Rachel's attempted access records from the previous night. 3 failed security breaches. Time stamped. Biometric confirmed. Rachel's shoulders dropped slightly. Sterling folded his hands. Captain Carter attempted to access restricted financial audit records without authorization. Rachel looked around the room, at the officers, at my parents, at me. Her voice was quieter now. "You've been spying on me." "No," Sterling said calmly. "The system has been recording you." Rachel's eyes moved back to me. Finally, the pieces started connecting in her mind. "You?" I didn't say anything. Sterling gestured toward the screen. "Skynet controls flight telemetry security access and operational monitoring across Fort Liberty." Rachel swallowed. She already knew that system. Every pilot did. They relied on it every day. Sterling continued. "The architect of that system is sitting in this room." Rachel's voice dropped to a whisper. "No." Sterling nodded slightly toward me. "Specialist Brooke Carter." The room stayed silent. Rachel stared at me like she was seeing a stranger. "That's impossible," I finally spoke. "It's not." Rachel shook her head slowly. "You're a logistics tech. That's the cover assignment." Rachel looked at the badge on my chest again. Her voice sounded hollow now. "You built Skynet, yes. That means..." She stopped talking halfway through the sentence. Because the answer was obvious. Rachel had spent years flying aircraft that relied on a system she didn't understand. A system she assumed was maintained by people she considered invisible. People like me. Sterling stood up. "Captain Carter, your financial misconduct and unauthorized system access are now under formal investigation." Rachel barely heard him. She was still staring at me. "All those years, yes, You let me believe you were nothing. I never corrected you. Rachel laughed weakly. Because it was funny, no. Then why? I looked at the system display behind her. Because I was busy building the thing that kept your aircraft in the air. Rachel slowly lowered into a chair. For the first time since I could remember, Captain Rachel Carter had nothing left to say. Rachel didn't leave that room as a captain. She left under escort. 2 military police officers walked her out quietly, while the officers at the table continued reviewing the evidence. No shouting, no dramatic speeches, just paperwork. In the military, careers usually end that way. Not with explosions, with documents. The investigation moved fast. When fraud, forged signatures, and safety violations all show up in the same file, there isn't much debate left. Rachel's command clearance was suspended that night. Her pilot status followed the next morning. 3 days later, the official notice arrived. Captain Rachel Carter was relieved of duty, pending court-martial review. Financial fraud, unauthorized system access, operational negligence that endangered other pilots during the demonstration flight. The Air Force doesn't treat those charges lightly, especially not when the evidence comes with timestamps and biometric confirmation. Skynet had recorded everything. Ironically, the same system Rachel relied on to fly had quietly built the case against her. I didn't attend the hearing. My job was already done. Instead, I went back to work. Maintenance building, same desk, same dusty boots. The base didn't suddenly treat me like a celebrity, and honestly, that was fine. The technicians still saluted when I entered the room, but after a few days, even that faded back into normal routine. Aircraft needed diagnostics. Flight data needed monitoring. Systems still needed someone paying attention to the numbers. 2 weeks after the hearing, my parents came to see me. They didn't call first. I saw them through the glass doors of the control building lobby. My father looked older than the last time I saw him. My mother looked nervous. I walked down to meet them. My father spoke first. "Brooke, hi, Dad." My mother stepped forward. "We need to talk." "Okay." We moved to a small meeting room near the lobby. No one else was inside. My mother sat down quickly. Her voice was tight. "You have to help your sister." I didn't react. "Rachel is facing prison, I know. She made mistakes. Yes. But she's still family," I nodded slowly. "That part hasn't changed." Mom leaned forward. "You have influence now. Not the kind you think. You built that whole system, yes. So you can talk to people. That's not how military investigations work." Mom's voice cracked slightly. "She's your sister." I looked at her for a long moment. Then I opened my bag and placed a sheet of paper on the table. Mom frowned. "What is that A-list?" She picked it up. 47 entries, dates, short descriptions. Rachel looked confused. "What does this mean?" I answered calmly. "These are the 47 times you both publicly compared me to Rachel." Mom blinked. What I pointed to the first line, age 12, school award dinner. You told the entire table Rachel would be the successful one. Mom looked down again. I pointed to another entry. Age 16, you said Rachel would fly jets while I'd probably work behind a desk. Rachel looked uncomfortable now. "That's ridiculous," I continued. Age 19, kitchen table conversation. You said Rachel's future mattered more because she had real ambition. My mother lowered the paper slowly. "You kept track of this?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because patterns matter." Rachel shook her head. "You're seriously holding childhood comments against us." I looked directly at her. "No. Then what is this?" "This is context." My father had been quiet the entire time. Now he finally spoke. "Brooke, are you saying we pushed Rachel too far?" I shook my head. "No, then what?" "You pushed her above consequences." Silence filled the room. I continued. When someone spends their whole life being told they're special, they eventually believe rules don't apply to them. Rachel leaned forward. "You're acting like I committed some huge crime. You forged Dad's signature. That was paperwork. You took $150,000 from a veterans fund. That was an investment. You altered aircraft safety reports. That was operational pressure." Rachel threw up her hands. "You're blowing everything out of proportion." I stood up. "No." Then I picked up another document from my bag and placed it on the table. My father looked at it carefully. "What's this, a trust account?" Mom frowned. "We already know about the Veterans Fund. This isn't that." Dad adjusted his glasses. The number printed on the page made him sit back slightly. "That can't be right." "It is." Rachel leaned closer. What is it? Dad read the amount out loud. $800,000. Rachel's head snapped toward me. Where did that come from? Dad started it 10 years ago. Dad nodded slowly. I put small investments aside while I was still working. Rachel looked shocked. Why didn't I know about this? Dad answered quietly. Because Brooke asked me not to tell you. Rachel stared at me. You hid this. Yes. Why? Because you would have spent it. Rachel's mouth opened but no words came out. I turned back to my father. I already transferred the first half. To what? A scholarship fund? Mom blinked. What scholarship fund? For enlisted soldiers who come from families that can't afford college. Rachel laughed weakly. You're giving away family money. Yes, why would you do that? I shrugged slightly. Because someone helped me once. Dad smiled faintly. Rachel looked around the room like she was trying to understand a language she'd never heard before. You're serious? Yes. She shook her head. All that money, and you're still walking around in those stupid dusty boots. I glanced down at them. They still had hangar dust on the leather. Yeah. Rachel leaned back in her chair. You could have lived like me. I never wanted to. The meeting ended a few minutes later. My parents left quietly. Rachel stayed behind with the legal officer waiting in the hallway. I walked outside into the afternoon sunlight. Across the base, training units were running drills on the field. Young recruits moving in formation. Sergeants shouting instructions. Normal life continuing. I started walking across the training ground. The same dusty boots hitting the dirt path with steady steps. For 12 years, people had assumed those boots meant I was small, that I was the quiet sister who stayed on the ground while someone else flew higher. But sometimes the person walking through the dust is the one quietly building the runway. And now I'm curious about something. If you were in my place, would you have helped Rachel just because she was family? Or would you have done the same thing I did? Tell me what you think in the comments. And if you want to hear more stories about resilience, justice, and the quiet people who end up changing the whole system, make sure you subscribe to the channel. A few weeks after everything settled down, someone on base asked me a question I hadn't really thought about before. They said, "You must feel pretty good watching Rachel finally face consequences." I understood what they meant. From the outside, the story probably looked simple. The arrogant sister lost everything. The quiet one finally won. But the truth is, it didn't feel like winning. There was no celebration, no victory speech, just silence. And that silence forced me to think about something I hadn't fully understood for years. Respect. Not the kind that comes from rank. Not the kind that comes from medals. The kind that comes from boundaries. For 12 years, I gave away more respect than I kept. And that was my mistake. People like to talk about sacrifice as if it automatically makes you a good person. But sacrifice without limits doesn't create respect. It creates expectations. I learned that slowly, 12 years slowly. When Rachel left for flight school, I told myself I was doing the right thing. Dad needed someone at home. The house needed to stay running. Medical bills didn't care about dreams, so I stayed. And for a long time, I believed that if you quietly did the responsible thing, people would eventually recognize it. That's what most of us are taught growing up. Work hard, stay humble, good things will follow. But life isn't always that neat. Sometimes when you carry the weight quietly, people start believing the weight belongs to you. They stop asking if it's heavy. They just assume you'll keep carrying it. That's exactly what happened in my family. Rachel became the success story, the pilot, the officer, the one everyone bragged about. And me, I became the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who didn't mind helping. At first, that didn't bother me. Helping family felt normal. But something subtle started happening over the years. The more problems I solved, the more people expected me to solve them. When Rachel needed money, I handled it. When the mortgage was late, I fixed it. When medical bills showed up, I paid them. Nobody forced me to do those things, but nobody stopped me either. And eventually something changed. Not in them. In me. I stopped asking a simple question. Where is the line? Because every healthy relationship needs a line. A place where helping ends and self-respect begins. The problem is most people don't notice when that line disappears. It fades slowly, one favor at a time. One small sacrifice after another. Until one day you wake up and realize something uncomfortable. You're not helping anymore. You're enabling. That's a hard truth. Especially inside a family. Families have a strange way of turning responsibility into obligation. If you're the stable one, people expect stability from you forever. If you're the calm one, they expect patience forever. If you're the reliable one, they assume you'll keep fixing everything. And when you finally stop, that's when the word appears. Selfish. I heard that word the night my mother slapped me. She called me selfish because I wouldn't sign away the house. That moment used to replay in my head a lot. But now when I think about it, something different stands out. Not the slap. The expectation behind it. She expected me to sacrifice again, because that's what I had always done. And when I didn't, the entire system broke. That's when I understood something important. People don't always respect sacrifice. They respect limits. The moment I froze Rachel's financial access, everything changed. The moment I refused to sign that document, everything shifted. Not because I became stronger overnight, but because I finally stopped giving away the authority people assumed they had over me. That's the strange part about boundaries. They don't control other people, they reveal them. When you start saying no, you learn very quickly who respected you and who was simply comfortable benefiting from you. Some people adjust, some people walk away, and some people get very angry. Rachel chose anger, but anger usually appears when someone loses control they thought they had. Looking back, I don't regret helping my family, not for a second. Taking care of my father was never a mistake. But if I could go back 12 years and talk to the younger version of myself sitting at that kitchen table, I would give her one piece of advice. Help people. Just don't disappear while doing it. Because your time matters, your effort matters, your future matters. Helping someone reach the sky doesn't mean you have to stay on the ground forever. And one more thing I learned along the way. Silence can be powerful, but silence has an expiration date. If you stay quiet long enough, people start believing your silence means agreement, that your patience means weakness, that your kindness means permission. Eventually, you have to speak. Maybe not loudly, but clearly. For me, that moment came the day I stopped paying for Rachel's choices. Not with anger, just with a decision. And that decision changed everything. So if you're watching this and you recognize yourself somewhere in this story, let me ask you something. Are you helping people because you want to? Or because you feel like you're not allowed to stop? There's a difference, a big one. And the moment you figure out where your line is, that's usually the moment people start treating you differently. A few days after the investigation wrapped up, one of the younger technicians asked me something that stuck in my head. He said, "Ma'am, how did you stay quiet for that long?" He wasn't asking about the system. He wasn't asking about the investigation. He meant Rachel. He meant the years of jokes, the comments, the way people assumed I was just the quiet sister who worked in the background. I thought about that question for a while. Because the truth is, staying quiet wasn't some kind of strategy. It was just how I worked. When you spend most of your career building systems instead of standing in front of them, you learn something interesting about people. The loudest person in the room usually isn't the one running the room. They're just the one everyone notices first. Rachel understood visibility. She understood cameras, interviews, and the way confidence can fill a space. She knew how to walk into a room and make people pay attention. And to be honest, there's nothing wrong with that. Confidence is useful. Leadership often requires it. But confidence and control are two very different things. Rachel controlled attention. I controlled infrastructure. And infrastructure is what keeps things working when attention moves somewhere else. That's something most people don't realize until they've been part of a large system. Whether it's the military, a company, or even a family. The people you see the most aren't always the people holding things together. Sometimes the real work happens in places nobody looks. In quiet offices, behind computer screens, inside systems that only matter when they fail. I spent years inside those systems. Flight telemetry, safety monitoring, command networks. It wasn't glamorous work. No cameras, no applause. But it taught me something important. Real value rarely needs to be loud. If a system works, people barely notice it. But if it stops working for 5 minutes, suddenly everyone wants to know who built it. The same rule applies to people. And systems have a strange advantage. They can be built to be more efficient than people. They can be built to be more effective than people. They can be built to be more reliable than people. They can be built to be more consistent than people. They can be built to be more accurate than people. They can be built to be more scalable than people. They can be built to be more adaptable than people. They can be built to be more resilient than people. They can be built to be more secure than people. They can be built to be more sustainable than people. They can be built to be more transparent than people. They can be built to be more trustworthy than people. They can be built to be more ethical than people. They can be built to be more inclusive than people. They can be built to be more diverse than people. They can be built to be more agile than people. They can be built to be more flexible than people. They can be built to be more collaborative than people. They can be built to be more empathetic than people. They can be built to be more compassionate than people. They can be built to be more human than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They can be built to be more humane than people. They and systems have a strange advantage. They tell the truth eventually. That's one of the reasons I never rushed to expose her. A lot of people have asked me that question. Why didn't I say something earlier? Why didn't I confront Rachel years ago? The honest answer is simple. Timing matters. If I had accused her 10 years ago, no one would have listened. She was the rising pilot, the decorated officer, the person everyone believed in. I was the quiet sister working in logistics. Sometimes truth needs the right moment to be heard. Otherwise, it just sounds like noise. That moment came the day the White Swan maneuver almost failed. When the system locked Rachel's aircraft, and everyone in that control room realized something they had never considered before. The person they thought was invisible had been running the safety network the entire time. That wasn't revenge, it was reality catching up. And reality has a way of arriving quietly. Another thing I've learned over the years is that being underestimated can actually be an advantage. People reveal a lot when they think you don't matter. They talk more freely. They make careless decisions. They stop paying attention. Rachel spent years assuming I was harmless. That assumption gave me something valuable. Time. Time to build. Time to learn. Time to understand systems she never even knew existed. Being underestimated can feel frustrating, but it also gives you space. Space to improve without pressure. Space to grow without competition. And eventually that quiet progress becomes something solid, something real. That's the part many people miss. Success doesn't always arrive in dramatic moments. Most of the time, it shows up slowly, skill by skill, year by year, while everyone else is watching something louder. So if you're someone who feels overlooked right now, I want you to remember something. Being ignored doesn't mean you're unimportant. Sometimes it just means people haven't realized where the real value is yet. Focus on building that value. Learn things other people don't want to learn. Solve problems other people avoid. Understand systems instead of just talking about them. Because when something eventually goes wrong, and something always does, the room will start looking for the person who actually knows how things work. And that person is rarely the loudest one. It's usually the quiet one who's been paying attention the whole time, the one who understands the details, the one who stayed calm while everyone else was arguing, the one who kept building while others were busy being noticed. And when that moment arrives, you won't need to announce yourself. Your work will already be speaking. That's what happened the day Rachel's aircraft locked in midair. The system spoke, not with drama, not with anger, just with facts. And facts have a way of ending arguments very quickly. So if there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. You don't have to win every conversation. You don't have to prove yourself in every room. And you definitely don't have to be the loudest person people hear. Just be the one who actually knows what's going on. Because the loudest voice in the room isn't always the one in charge, but the person who understands the system usually is. And before we finish, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the quiet person everyone underestimated? Only to realize later that you were the one holding everything together. Tell me your story in the comments. I read more of them than you might think. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, quiet strength, and the moments when truth finally catches up with arrogance, make sure you subscribe to the channel. There are plenty more stories like this one.
Final note. This story is a work of fiction, but the valuable lessons we discuss are entirely real and continue to happen to many people every day. If this style isn't for you, that's perfectly okay. Please feel free to look for other content that better suits your needs.